it was clear that we had to write, we had to do a play about the AIDS epidemic. We were still in the absolute center of that devastating hurricane, and we had to respond to that. And then there came a grant opportunity from the National Endowment for the Arts. And let me say this very clearly. Angels in America exists because it was commissioned by the federal government, by the National Endowment for the Arts. Back when it was illegal for the National Endowment to give grants to individual artists. And it will be again, it must be. But in any case, so we applied for the grant. And Toby said, I've got a great name, I don't know what it means, but Angels in America. And I said, that's a great name. So we wrote that in. Then we made up a bunch of other things and stuck it in a paragraph, sent it off, and got the grant. And that began what was a 6-year process from 1986 to 1992 when the play finally premiered in Los Angeles.
What role does sort of the old classics that aren't necessarily going to, I don't want to say not going to challenge us, but aren't going to challenge us in the same way that the stuff that the public theater maybe does, what role do they play?
Well, not in the same way, but I've seen productions of our town that reduced me to a puddle. I think that our town is like the sucker punch in American theater because I was making a comparison. It's actually like it's like Doll's House, which is you think you remember it and you think you know what it is and you think you've got a little box around. And when you see a good production of it, it rips your heart out. It's one of the great. It's a play about death. That's what it's about, and death is not a subject we like to look at. And Wilder is brilliantly subversive play figures out how to get us to look at it. And we do old plays too, with the New York Shakespeare Festival.
Right. Oh, I thought you commissioned those.
The art of drama is the art of describing how people change. And not just describing it in general, but capturing the exact moment, the exact way that hearts and minds and souls change. We don't know exactly the date that theater was born at. We don't know the exact moment. We do know about the decade, 510, and BC in Athens. And what we do know is it was exactly the same decade that democracy was invented in the same city. You think that's a coincidence? I don't think so. And again, there's a lot of problems with Athenian democracy, but that basic idea that power was going to flow from the people to their rulers, not the other way around, was birthed there by the side of the Mediterranean. And in that same decade, somebody came up with the idea of drama. And legend has it was somebody called Thespis. But sometime in that decade, somebody got the idea, Thespis, got the idea, what if instead of talking to you, what if I were just to turn and talk to somebody else on stage? Thespis invented the idea of dialogue. It's fantastic. It was invented, it wasn't always there. Invented. And once dialogue has happened, it changes everything. As soon as I turn like this, you lean forward. Because at that point, when we're having a dialogue, I'm not asking you to take what I say as true anymore. As a matter of fact, even the other guy on stage with me isn't taking what I say as true, because he's arguing with me, because we know there's got to be conflict for there to be a drama. So we're disagreeing with each other.
I don't agree with that.
So what does that mean? That means two things right away. First, the truth is no longer unitary. Truth is no longer anybody's possession. Truth is something that happens in debate, in dialogue between different points of view. That's a huge change. The other thing that happens is I'm no longer asking you to receive what I say as the truth. I'm asking you to see my point of view and put yourself in my shoes for a minute. And then he's going to talk, and you're going to put yourself in his shoes for a minute. You're going to empathize with somebody whose point of view is different than yours. Those are two absolutely essential components of democracy. The belief that nobody has the right answer, that the right answer can only come in debate between different points of view, and that to make a democracy work, we have to practice the act of empathy, of imagining what it looks like from somebody else's point of view. Let me give you another example. You know, there was a time when it was accepted that education for K through 12 should be free, and that everybody should have the same education, and that everybody in America was entitled. My kid goes to a private school right now, and I'm ashamed. And I do it because I can't send him to the school in my name, the public school in my name. That is a tragedy. And what that says about America, that we've re-separated, we've re-segregated. I mean, I don't know how it is here in Colorado Springs, but I tell you, in a lot of places it's that way. It's a terrible thing. The public libraries. But there was such a, you know, one of the things about, you know, Joe's brilliance again, I gotta say, he founded a public theater in the building that was the cornerstone of the New York Public Library, the first free lending library in the city, the Astor Place Library. And in that library, that was a radical idea. People should be able to walk in here and take out books for nothing and read them and bring them back. There was a time when that's, now it's becoming a radical idea again, unfortunately. There was shutting library branches, we're forcing libraries to do fundraising. So in other words, I'm saying there's a lot of things that we used to believe should be free, and that in certain ways we still have the apparatus for making them free. We've got to strengthen all of those things, and the theater should just add its voice to them. And make no mistake, there's a crisis of black leadership in the American theater. My theater was run by George Wolfe, and for 10 years, while George was running it, could reasonably make the claim that we were the only major American theater that was no longer a white theater. It's not just because we had a black artistic community, it's because of George's politics and the way George ran the theater and what the repertoire was, that you couldn't say the public theater was a white theater anymore. It was an American theater. And it did some white plays and it did some non, but it wasn't a white theater doing outreach to the black community. That was a huge achievement. When it came time for George to be replaced, I'm not supposed to know who the short list was of who was going to replace him. I won. But I do know, in the final 20 candidates, there was not a single director of color. And that is because the American theater has done a piss-poor job of developing African-American leadership. I'll tell you, how many black directors get hired to direct world premieres of white plays? How many black directors get hired to direct Shakespeare? How often does it go the other way?
As we talk about the American theater and the changing role of newspapers and criticism, it seems to me like we're sort of both struggling to figure out our relevance.
Well, look, there need to be professional critics. There need to be really well-educated, really passionate professional critics. When critics are doing their job well, in my opinion, they're not consumer guides. Mm-hmm. They're people who are actually helping be the intermediaries to create a dialogue between the audience and the theaters about what they're doing and why. So the crisis that I think is happening now is not a crisis of that function. It's a crisis of the business model of newspapers.
Right.
And that's clearly changing. The beautiful thing about this crisis is it's made somebody like me incredibly sympathetic about the New York Times. I've spent most of my career, of course, hating the because you hate the fact they have so much power over you.
Sure.
But then if you start to contemplate a world without the New York Times, you start getting really scared. Because just as in all of the other fields, with theater criticism, you need some place that's going to provide a living to people who can therefore actually take the time to become experts at their field.
Right.
And that's the way we feel about investigative reporting in Iraq, and it's the way we feel about theater critics.
Right.
And yet, if that business model blows up, bloggers don't replace it.
Right.
You know, and somehow the terrible idea we're looking at is maybe it's just going to be everybody's opinion is going to get to float around the internet.
Right.
That's not what we need from theater critics.
Right.